I didn't realize in 2004 when we wrote the book, How to Get Stupid White Men Out of Office, that we would have done it in such a great way. But it is nice to see a change. I want to welcome everyone to our discussion today. And what is our discussion today? We're talking about youth and violence. And so often I think that those terms go hand in hand, that we see young people as not only survivors of a violent world, but also as perpetrators of a violent world. And hopefully a lot of our dialogue today will get us to understand that the violence that our young people are responding to is something that we can actually change, and that we do see solutions happening around the globe where young people are stopping violence in their communities and stopping violence within themselves, which is a very important aspect, the aspect of transformation. Martin Luther King reminds us that either we go up together or we go down together. And he says, either we go up together or we go down together. Let us develop this kind of dangerous unselfishness. And I'd like to start off our morning with that quote, with this idea of our interconnectedness, that either we will go up together or we will go down together. So what can we do to develop a dangerous unselfishness? We meet here today because we understand that violence and our acceptance of violence has led us down a path of inevitable destruction. We also understand that young people are a key part of our solution and should be center in how we discuss moving forward. Youth movements have always pushed humanity towards justice. Here in this country, we can think of SNCC. We can think of the fact that King was merely 24 years old when he told everybody that we have a dream. We can look at Diane Nash, who was 16 years old and pregnant with child when she decided she was going to sit in a lunch counter in Woolworths and demand justice. We can look at the youth ANC and see a young man who was willing to go to jail for 27 years in order to fight for an end of apartheid. And as someone who's entered her 30s, I see that the older you get, the more cautious you get. And I was talking to a friend of mine last night, and he said, well, what are you going to talk about with youth and, solutions? And I said, I almost want to call this conference, the freedom of not having a mortgage. And it's like what you're able to do when you have that freedom, when you can give everything up to fight for things. I want to throw out a couple of themes that I hope we will keep in mind as we go through our panels today. And I want to start off with a number. 27% of the world's population is under the age of 15. When I saw that, it was staggering to me. Not 18 to 35, not 12 to 30, but under the age of 15, over a quarter of our world's population. So if we think that we do not need to get to know young people, we're fooling ourselves, because time is going to ensure that young people will be the leaders of tomorrow. Our time will run out. And if we don't responsibly pass the baton, what are we going to do? And how are we going to continue to build? So a few themes. First of all, solutions exist. Everyone sitting on this panel and everyone sitting on our panel this afternoon are examples. You in the audience know that solutions exist. We can talk about organizations like Love Life in South Africa dealing with AIDS. We can talk about Black August, a combination of young hip-hop activists here in the US working with young hip-hop activists in Brazil to talk about political prisoners. Solutions are out there. It is critical that we recognize that they are the solutions and prop them up as such. We have an opportunity now with technology. We are more connected than ever. Our hyper connectivity can cause us to create global communities. And young people understand that. Young people honestly build relationships on the web, whether we understand that or not. Young people build with one another throughout the world, really building true relationships with folks they have never seen, they have never talked to. That we need to understand more. 87% of young people in the US are on the internet, and 33% of youth worldwide text. Right before I jumped up, I just texted to my Twitter account that I was about to jump up here and give this speech. Texting is going to be an amazing way that we are going to be able to remain connected. We also have an opportunity around shared culture. I was in India a little bit ago at the World Parliamentary Forum, and I was walking through the streets of Mumbai, and I was obviously not from India. And it was during 2006, and we weren't necessarily, everyone wasn't loving us, right? As understandably so. And I was walking around and checking everything out, and all of a sudden I saw this little kid walking up, and he had on a Tupac shirt. And I looked at his Tupac shirt, and he looked at me walking around, and we looked at each other, and we did something that I had no idea was a universal language. We did like this. And I did like this to him, and he did like this to me, and we were connected, and I had no idea, who he was, but I knew that if I went back to his house, my iTunes would look just like his iTunes. And we probably could have sat there all night listening to hip-hop CDs and talking about who killed Pac and who killed Biggie. Hip-hop gives us a shared language, a shared culture, a way to walk into new world with a familiarity. We're going to talk a lot today about hip-hop, and not just to disparage it, but to say that we have an opportunity here to see ourselves come together and to continue to push a culture that is actually quite beautiful. In a similar way to spirituals being the outcries of the slaves, hip-hop was the outcries of young people dying in the streets. It was the outcries of blacks and Puerto Ricans coming together in the Bronx. And I often like to remind people that it wasn't just a black thing or a Puerto Rican thing, but in the beginning, one of the hottest DJs was a Jewish kid. It was an intercultural, interracial coming together that created hip-hop. And now it's being done around the world. So my friends, we come here today not to become paralyzed by the problems of violence and by the pathetic nature that so many of us live in as young people, but to become inspired to actualize change, to build with one another, to deconstruct our own relationships with one another. If we can create peace in this room, we can create peace outside of this room. If we can build relationships with one another here, we can build relationships outside of here. And that is really key. Us understanding that either we will go up together or we will go down together. It is imperative that we develop a dangerous unselfishness. Thank you. I now have the honor of introducing someone who I am a huge fan of. I first met Alex several years ago when we were starting an organization that you're going to hear me talk more about called the Gathering for Justice, which Marcia alluded to, that was started by Harry Belafonte. And Alex was, and is, he's still right here, is this tour de force. His understanding of not only gang culture, but of Black-Brown unity is incredible. And not only is he a moderator of our panel today, but I would suggest that people pick his brain during the Q&A. Alex Sanchez is the co-founder and executive director of the Los Angeles branch of Homies Unidos. He was formerly an active gang member, and now he works to serve underserved communities throughout Los Angeles and El Salvador. His expertise in gang culture and youth criminalization developed through his experience has him working, and after serving time in California State Prison, has him working with Homies Unidos to end violence in Los Angeles. In 2002, Alex Sanchez won political asylum, and was not deported. And he continues to educate the community on violence and expanding the reach of Homies Unidos. Alex Sanchez is going to be your moderator for our first panel.